What is up, Wolfpack? I decided to do something a little different. I actually had several people in the comment section below asking, what's your slap technique and how do you do that? Not just comment section, but on Twitter and in a couple other places. And I decided, well, you know what? Let me give it a go. One thing I want to do before I get into even like showing you kind of what I do. One, I picked this up from a variety of places, including Victor Wooten's various lessons out there, even some things from Scott's free bass lessons. I'll give some links in the below. And I picked it up from watching people like Stanley Clark, Marcus Miller, and a few other folks, Les Claypool, of course. And so I got a large number of influences I've used to make this happen. So I wanted to just give you that quick aside and let you know one thing that I learned actually from Field Day of Corn is even before you start slapping, because if you're not used to doing this motion, then you're not going to be able to do it properly. So what I would suggest is you do this on various objects. So you literally just start working out your thumb a little bit. I do it on my steering wheel every once in a while, much to my wife's displeasure, and other things like that. Really, that is one good way to start, because you're going to have to, you want to make it so you're not hitting this as hard as you think you need to, so you can have the fast switch muscles to go from, you know, just going. So that's, you know, just another thing that you can do. So the other thing is, don't start with this, because you're going to want to start with something more simple, just like a basic octave pattern. Now, the other thing that you want to learn, like keep an eye on, is there's two portions to slapping. There's slapping with the thumb. So that's one thing. And then there's also popping, which is where you literally pluck with your fingers like this. Now, that's going to really exercise your calluses. So if you don't play with fingers normally, you're going to have to build up some calluses. And in order to have those, you know, once you have those calluses, it'll be easy to just roll off. And it's like, you know, doing this, except it's just a different motion. It's more of a plucking thing. And you use your wrist to help a little bit. Because if you use your wrist on the bottom end there, you know, it kind of creates this back and forth motion, so you can do little riffs like that. So that's a big thing. And I'll try to get this zoomed in for you as well. So let's break down the motion a little bit more even, because I know that we've covered kind of how to do it. So I will be right back. I'm going to zoom in, and I want to just show you, like, break down this right here. So one thing you want to do is, it's very tempting to just go slap with like your finger going down this way. I mean, it still kind of makes the noise. It's good to be relaxed. One thing I do, though, is I try to think about my thumb being like this on the string. So if you look down and you see your thumb basically being parallel with the string. And so it doesn't end up looking like that, because you still want to have some looseness. But the difference between thinking about this versus not can really upset your accuracy, especially if you're moving down, you know, around strings and everything. So that's important, because if you're thinking about your thumb, keeping it just a little stiff and making sure it's as parallel as possible while you're doing the slapping, it ups your accuracy on the strings to a great degree. So again, this is just right hand. There's more stuff on over this way that'll happen. But so that's one thing. So you want to make sure your fingers like this as much as possible. So the other thing is, now I used to be under the impression that you want to slap, but don't slap over the pickups. That's a mistake. I mean, it creates a different sound, but the problem is there's a giant spike that happens because you're hitting the pickup to the string. So you end up wanting to hit it. Some basses, it's going to be right over here. I just kind of shoot for here, and that usually ends up having my slap technique over here. Because naturally, if you move from here to here, it sort of just pushes your whole hitting down this way anyway. And that helps get the sound. that, you know, most slap guys want. What you'll notice is for that solo video I released, I was using just my back pickups, my bridge pickups. This is the bridge. So these pickups right here, because as you bring the pickups back this way, the sound becomes more mid-rangey and less low end. And since I was doing a lot of tapping, I wanted that. Now, if you're in a mix though, you usually want to blend both for your slapping. Not always, but what I usually do is do that so that you get that nice, thick, chunky sound, which is because the mid-range is sort of canceled out a little bit due to the way the pickups pick up the sound, translate it into electric noise, and bring it over. So that's important too, if you're really having trouble finding that slap sound that you're looking for. So again, recap, we've gone over, we need to have this strapped, and now, so generally, I mean, you can slap wherever. I mean, it's just another way to attack the strings. But generally speaking, if you're doing something like, I don't know, you're not going to go, because that's just not, it's not efficient. It sucks. So you use these fingers, and just like proper, and of course, I'm skipping the slap technique. If you want a beginner bass lesson, let me know in the comments. And so just like you want to have a nice even back and forth with your finger technique, and of course I usually use 3 fingers, but for slapping I only use 2 because of the position of the hand. Okay, so you have back and forth, and it's the same way. So instead it's this. You're using your wrist a little bit more because you're pulling up. So it's a combination of both this action, you know, the come hither. There's a joke in there that I won't say, and the come hither motion with both your index finger and your middle finger, and some wrist action, because what you're usually doing is you're going. So if you're pulling up with your wrist, it allows you to have the motion to come down. And again, we're talking about small motions here. You don't want to go, I mean, unless you're putting on a show. I mean, there's reasons for it, but if you're trying to the best technique possible to play the best possible, the most even possible, small movements. You also don't need to hit as hard as you think you do, because I used to go, but like that you actually end up losing some tone. I mean, sometimes you want to hit loud, but generally speaking, in a general line, you just want to go. So you want to have it really light, but it still imparts that tone because of the motion that you're doing. See what I mean? That's the general gist of the slap technique on the right hand. So now we have the left hand part, which is, because again, this is actually all part of the technique to me, because it's not technically the slap technique. We just went over that. But, you know, as you saw in the Game Grumps, like funky Game Grumps song video, as well as the Softlight video, that I do some other stuff to make more notes happen. And that's just with both, and it's thinking about your bass more as a percussion instrument, all right? So really just mute the strings, and good technique on your left hand is to kind of have, as best you can, you know, your fingers resting across the strings so there's no ringing happening. So it's nice and clean. So that's one important thing that you need to remember. And of course, have your thumb anchored around the center and just do that. So what you do is you're bringing it down a little bit. And so this, and again, you might have to get some gripper strength, because this actually requires a lot of strength to get that to ring through properly. So what you're doing is you're going bop, 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 bop. So slap, pop, slap, smack. I'm going to call it smack. Thwack. I'm going to say thwack, so it's got a different syllable. So bop, 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 slap, pop, slack, slap, pop, thwack, slap, pop, thwack, slap, pop, thwack. And then you do that. And if you hold on to one of the strings, one of the frets of the strings, then you get the different notes. So instead of just going, you get. But the nice thing is, if you're using your right hand as your tempo, which I usually do. I usually think of this as the tempo keeper. So if the tempo is this, then it just stays that way. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, but then I add. And then if I just want to go 1 and 2 and 1. You see what I mean? You just kind of incorporate that there if it's necessary. I mean, obviously sometimes you don't want to do that. It's kind of stupid, but it's a cool technique. For an example of a song that just uses it. Lacquerhead by Primus is a good example of that technique being used very effectively. So the only other thing I want to go over with the left hand is that's the percussive version. The other thing that gets sillily impressive if you do it right is it's a guitar technique. It's tapping, or hammering on rather. So you hit the string and then slam down with the index finger and then slam down. So you're not doing more strikes down here. You're just producing the notes. So you can produce a lot more notes fast. Now you have to be careful and make sure you're muting so it doesn't get too crazy, but so you probably saw that in my bass solo for in pieces. So that's just another way to get a lot of notes out. And I mean, it's pretty reliant on open strings, but you could theoretically just do a blanket, so it's like. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, and it's just a way to, again, have more notes, look really impressive. Is it really impressive? No, because it's all about economy and motion. And so it sounds really cool, so you can go. Yeah. And that's all the techniques put together. Quick recap. You have the, usually in triplets, because it's 3 hits. Okay, so you have that. Then you have, I'll just do one string for you. And then make sure you keep your thumb as perpendicular or parallel to the string as possible when you hit it. And use some more of your wrist, because of course you're not using any wrist doing this. Use some wrist action to do your popping. And that is how I do it. Now, there's a lot of other techniques, as I said before, but that's just how I've, over the years, grown to do slapping. So I hope you enjoyed this brief lesson into slap, and I hope you have an excellent day.